It's Tuesday, and that means it's time for terror. Have you ever heard of the Wendigo? A monstrous beast of a thing, 9 feet tall, a sickly, thin white body with antlers sprouting out of its head and an insatiable lust for human flesh. It will stop at nothing to eat you alive once it has gained your scent. The year was 1972 when I ran into this beast. My name is Jacques, and I was a fur trapper in northern Quebec, Canada. Me and my lifelong heterosexual partner, Francois, would set trap lines every winter to harvest the finest pelts you would ever laid eyes upon. This was how we stayed alive, the trapping. It was a hard life, but a good one, especially on cold winter nights with Francois to keep me company. We would stay up late drinking whiskey and playing cards and telling jokes we had heard 1,000 times. For many years, this was our routine until that godforsaken winter of 1972 when everything changed. I woke early one crisp winter morning as Francois still slept in our double-wide bed and left the safety of the cabin to go check the trap lines. That day was cold as the embers that burn in the depths of hell, but I was bundled up in my buckskin winter jacket and beaver hat with a thermos of piping hot coffee to keep me warm. As I slogged through the forest checking line after line, I began to sense something was wrong. The traps were empty. Never before had this occurred in all my years out in the Quebec wilderness. Slowly I plodded onwards from one trap to the next, again empty of the precious animal carcasses I had grown accustomed to finding. What was strange was that there were signs of animal footprints in the area, but like I said, no dead squirrels, no raccoons, no beavers to harvest. Then I heard a crunchy noise behind me, as if someone or something was lumbering at my rear. "Hello there!" The voice of a man rang out. I turned on my heel to see a man wearing winter jacket and a backpack, standing knee-deep in the snow with goggles on. "Sacre bleu! You scared the devil out of me," I exclaimed. "Sorry, friend. Didn't mean to startle you. My name is Joe Bennett, and I'm with the Wild Duck Conservation Fund," this Joe said to me. "All the ducks have flown south. Why are you here?" I asked. "Oh, I know that. I'm out here doing field research on the mating habits of wild pigs," said Joe, wiping fog from his goggles. "Wild pigs?" I asked. "Yes, sir. A very rare species is purported to live in these very woods," replied Joe. "Well, I have no time for pigs and must be checking my traps," I told the man. "Very well, then. I'll be on my way. Gotta lie on the ground to cover myself," said Joe, the pig finder. And with that, the strange man disappeared over a ridge heading north as I continued deeper into the forest, seeking my prized animals. With many hours passing now, and the sun beginning to set, and still no sign of a filled trap to be had, I stopped and took a long swig from my thermos, letting the coffee burn down my throat. That's when I heard a terrible screeching sound from the deep within the woods. It sounded like a lion and a woman and a baby screaming in agony. Chills ran down my proud Quebecois spine. What in the deuce was that, I thought. Then again, another horrible scream erupted from the woods, this time closer, and in the distance I could see something lumbering through the trees towards me. A sense of palpable dread washed over me. I reached for my rifle, but sacre bleu, I had left it back in the cabin. I was defenseless. The fear came in waves over my body, over and over again, like the waves of the Atlantic Ocean crashing down. With great trepidation and ice forming in my veins, I turned on my heel and began to run as fast as I could in the knee-deep snow, not knowing what creature lurked behind me, growing ever closer as the sun finally set. It felt as if I had run for hours into the now pitch-black night as a crescent moon barely hung overhead. All the while I could hear the terrible screech noise coming from all around me, as if this thing was toying with me. Finally I arrived at the cabin, but no lights were on, and the door was ajar. I was about to call out for Francois when a feeling of dread overtook me. I crept closer to the door, not knowing what I may find. Quietly I opened the wooden door and sparked a lantern to peer inside the cabin. To the left of the door sat my rifle. I picked it up and called out for Francois. "Francois, are you here, mon ami?" Silence hung fat and pregnant like a sow in the air. As I swept my lantern around the small room we had so joyously shared all these years, I was met with horror beyond horror. Blood covered the walls. It dripped from the ceiling, and what looked like intestines were strung about like Christmas lights. The stench of death was strong in the night air. I looked towards the bed and pulled back the covers to find the severed head of Joe, the pig finder, with his goggles still on. Sacre bleu, what was going on here, and where was my beloved friend, Francois? Suddenly, and unexpectedly from behind me, I heard a gurgling, not quite right voice. Jacques, please Jacques, you must help me, my closest of friends. I turned to see some 10 meters away, just the darkened outline of a man standing in the snow, blood covering him. Francois? Is it you? I asked. What is going on? The man crept closer, but something was wrong with his walk. It was like he jittered, as if his legs were foreign to him, and one arm hung lower than the other. I am so hungry, Jacques. You must let me eat, the man said, and still came closer. I raised my lantern to see him better. Francois, what is going on? What did you do to the man in the cabin? I pleaded with him. So very hungry I am, Jacques. I need flesh, human flesh. You see, when you left this morning, the beast came for me as I slept in our bed. It broke into our loving cabin and forced me to eat the flesh of this man you call Joe, the pig finder. The beast told me it was so lonely and jealous of us and wanted a friend like you or me had, a buddy to stalk the woods with. I was so scared and feared if I did not partake of the human flesh it presented, it would eat me next. I am so sorry, Jacques, explained my best friend Francois. Then from behind me in the woods, the beast strode forward, standing 9 feet tall, and as gaunt as a skeleton, with blackened horns, yellow eyes, and blood dripping from mangled fangs. The beast began to laugh, and Francois slowly began to laugh with it. I am sorry, Jacques, but now you will be our next delicious meal, for I have a new friend, the Wendigo, cackled Francois. At first I stood in shock. How could this be happening? All the loving years we'd kept each other warm by the fire, and this is how it ends? No, not for me. I raised my rifle and fired at the beast standing behind my friend. A bullet ripped through its ugly, horrible face, and it screamed. Then I threw my lantern at Francois, and he ignited into a fireball of pure agony and suffering. As he stood screaming and burning, the monster behind him fled back into the woods, apparently afraid of fire, I assumed. Thinking, but not thinking, I ran into the back of my cabin and hopped on my ski-doo and gunned it as far away from this accursed place as I could. All the while, Francois' screams echoed deep into the Quebec winter night. After that terrible night in 1972, I never returned to those woods in northern Quebec ever again. I don't really know what that creature was that Francois called the Wendigo, but some nights all these years later, as I lie in my bed in my nursing home, sometimes I can still hear the screeching howl of the Wendigo, and I know it still lusts to taste of my withered, old man flesh.
I awoke to the smell of cooking bacon and fresh coffee brewing. It was Sunday morning, and my wife was already up getting breakfast going. Ah, another glorious Sunday. I sat at the table with Jenny and the kids and dug into my plate of delicious goodness. My son Stan and daughter Gertrude wolfed down the eggs, bacon, and pancakes like, well, hungry wolves. I turned to Jenny. Ready for another wonderful Sunday service at Mount Hope Church? Jenny smiled like she usually did. I can't wait to hear this week's sermon from Pastor Jeff. I bet it will be more thrilling than last week's. I know we'll miss Pastor Fred, but this new pastor we just got sure is exciting to hear speak the good word, Jenny replied. Truly, Pastor Jeff taking over for Pastor Fred after his tragic accident with the lawnmower has been nothing but a blessing to our church, I concurred. As we arrived in our Tesla Volt into the parking lot of the church, the sun was bright and beautiful. What a wonderful, perfect day this was going to be, I thought to myself. I could hardly wait to hear the faith team sing about our wonderful Savior, and then Pastor Jeff tell us all the good word from the good book. I straightened my tie and led my little family of worshipers into Mount Hope Church and took our usual seats up front. The church slowly filled with our friends and families, eager to get their prayer on. A chord was struck on the acoustic guitar, and the faith team began to sing and play their instruments, leading us off with one of my favorite songs, Jesus, Take My Blood, Make Me As Holy As Thou. What a wonderful tune it was. I beamed with joy as Jenny and the kids sang along, knowing every word by heart. The band followed this up with Jesus Was Killed for Thee, a more somber worship song, but a great one nonetheless. Before I knew it, the song portion of the sermon was over, and the bowls for collection were being passed around. I fished into my wallet and deposited $50. Little Stan put in $2 from his allowance. God bless my son. Don't forget to give generously to Mount Hope, for those that give generously will be rewarded generously in heaven, cried out one of the ushers. After all of the money had been collected, it was time for the main event, Pastor Jeff's sermon. Oh, how I had longed all week to hear the honeyed words flow from his righteous mouth. Pastor Jeff was about 5'10", with a black goatee and spiked up hair, around 32 years old. Some might say a little young to lead a church, but these first few weeks he'd done an excellent job so far. Pastor Jeff took his microphone and proclaimed, "Hallelujah, brothers and sisters in Jesus. Welcome one and all to this house of the Lord." The crowd clapped and cheered, hanging on every word. Yes, faithful servants of Jesus, we come together as men and women and children of the faith to exalt our Lord and Savior, much like Peter, John, and Matthew did so many moons ago, Pastor Jeff told the church. Pastor Jeff stopped and took a sip from his water bottle, coughed lightly before continuing to share with us all the good word of our imminent salvation at the hands of God, and how even the angels themselves looked down upon Mount Hope Church with pride and blessings. And so Pastor Jeff delivered another fantastic sermon that didn't feel nearly as long as it was. Then the darkness began. The pastor began to cough wildly and spit froth from his lips. One of the ushers ushered up to him to see if he was okay. Pastor Jeff pushed the man away violently and looked up at the congregation with blackened eyes. "Can you take me higher?" He screamed out loud like a banshee, and I kid you not, began to levitate upwards off the floor, rising nearly 3 feet in the air. "To a place where blind men see, can you take me higher? To a place with golden streets." He yelled, his voice hoarse, as if his vocal cords were being strained and sliced into bits. The church sat in bewilderment at what was occurring before our very eyes. What kind of foul devilry was this? Pastor Jeff began to spin in the air and began to speak in evil tongues. The demonic gibberish spewed forth from his lips in blasphemy of God. Then suddenly he fell back to the floor, knocking over the collection plates to his left and right. Money spilled everywhere. No one in the church dared to move. What was going on? And those words he spoke of being taken higher, I know I'd heard them before, but where I could not remember. Cautiously, I stood up and moved towards Pastor Jeff. He lay still as a newborn baby on the church floor. I reached down, but as I did, with ferocious strength, his hand lifted up and grabbed me by the tie, strangling me. I could hardly breathe. Pastor Jeff's black eyes stared deep into mine, and he spoke. "'Cause when you are with me, I am free, I am careless, I believe above all the others will fly. This brings tears to my eyes, my sacrifice. You'll be my sacrifice." His grip tightened around my neck. I tried in vain to push him away, but it was no good. Two of the ushers ran over to intervene, but with his free hand, Pastor Jeff shoved them both to the floor. Then Pastor Jeff began to laugh maniacally and vomited blood into my face. This was it. I was doomed. It seemed the devil himself had possessed our once tranquil and good-natured pastor. As my vision began to blur, I heard a clang ring out in the church, and suddenly the pastor's demonic grip fell limp as he and I crumpled to the floor. Standing above us, holding up one of the collection plates, above her head was my sweet wife, Jenny. She had saved me from certain death.
"Son of a bitch! How dare you do this in the house of the Lord, Pastor Jeff?" she screamed at him. By now others had assembled around us, helping me back to my feet. Pastor Jeff began to stir. Jenny raised the plate to beat him again if he got violent. He looked up at us, his eyes normal once again, just a tepid brown color. "What happened?" asked Pastor Jeff. "Seems you were possessed by the devil himself," I replied. Weeks later, after the scandal and removal of Pastor Jeff as leader of Mount Hope Church, the police came to my door and explained everything. It turns out Pastor Jeff had been leading a double life, indulging in secular music, with one band in particular standing out above the rest. Creed. Yes, the seemingly wholesome on-the-surface rock band, Creed, was apparently his favorite to listen to. Now I knew where I'd heard those devil lyrics from before, and it all made sense. Pastor Jeff's love of Creed had tainted his soul and led to demonic possession. To this day, I curse the name of lead singer Scott Stapp and all the evil his music stands for. So let this be a cautionary tale for you good folks of the faith, to never dabble in the satanic croonings of Creed, for you may not know what evil you're allowing into your very souls. I was up at the crack of dawn to feed my pigs and chickens. If you haven't guessed by now, I'm a farmer. My name is Angus, and my family has been on this land for as long as I can recall, going back to my great-great-grandpappy's days. As I came up to the chicken coop to give them their feed, I noticed something strange to me. A balloon animal, dog, sat in the coop. Now where could that have come from, I thought to myself. I looked across our fields and into the dark woods. Couldn't see a damn thing stirring. Was this some kind of joke being played on me? Then I thought, maybe my young son Toby had put it there, but that didn't make no sense. I finished up my chores after a few hours and headed into the farmstead to fetch a glass of water. Toby was playing with his toy tractor in the living room. "Toby, you know anything about this?" I asked, and showed him the purple balloon dog. "No, Papa, ain't seen that before, but it sure looks neat," he replied. This troubled me deeply, but I had no time to dwell on such things as the fields needed tending to. Long into the afternoon I worked. The skies were overcast and a dark malevolent gray bordering on pitch black. Then I heard it, quiet, above barely a whisper, the sound of laughter, a sick, maniacal kind of laughter only a madman would make. It resonated across the farm, carried on the wind. I looked up towards the woods that bordered my property and saw what looked to be the shadow of a man moving between the trees. "Who goes there?" I yelled at them. Silence was the only response I got. The laughter died off as suddenly as it had started. So I put down my scythe, headed towards the woods to investigate. The trees cast long, ominous shadows all around me. I stepped into the thicket and couldn't see anyone. As I searched deeper into the undergrowth, I came across two more things that puzzled me. Another balloon animal. This one looked like a giraffe, but was covered in what appeared to be red paint, and scuffed up in the ground were shoe prints. Large, comically oversized shoe prints. "What the hell is going on here?" I said to the woods as I picked up the balloon giraffe. The smell of copper on it was fierce. By God, what I initially thought to be red paint was blood. I dropped it. As I did, I heard the sound of my pigs squealing something fierce from their pen beside the old barn. Quickly I exited the woods and made my way over to the pig pen, only to find 3 of my prized pigs gutted and gasping in the mud. Their entrails spilled out onto them in a horrible mess as they died. This was wrong. All wrong. Some sick fucker was on my farm and up to no good. Then I noticed my scythe I had left in the field was propped up in the pen, dripping blood. Why would someone do this? I'm a well-liked farmer in my small town. No enemies, no trouble with the law. With trepidation, I began back towards my house. I was about 10 yards from the porch when I heard the sick laughter echo out again, but this time coming from the direction of the barn. I hurried inside, told my wife something evil was afoot, and to take Toby and head to her sister's house. She didn't question me. I loaded up in our truck and drove off as quick as possible. Then I got on the phone and called up my old pal Jebediah. The phone rang and rang, 2, 3, 4 rings, until it finally answered. "Jeb, it's Angus. Got some trouble on the farm. Might need an extra shotgun and a pair of hands to help me out," I asked. Jeb whistled loudly and said he'd be right over. For a tense 20 minutes I waited on the front porch, rifle in hand, waiting on my friend to arrive. The skies began to darken further still.
Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I saw Jeb's old yellow truck come rumbling down the old dirt road. He pulled up to the beginning of my driveway and exited his truck. That's when the most bizarre and frightening thing I've ever seen happened. From the woods, moving faster than cheetahs, men came running out, a blur of activity. Their faces were all bright white, their clothes brightly colored in stripes and circles. Wait, these were fucking clowns. They surrounded Jeb in his truck and began to laugh, wide evil grins to their ugly painted faces. From the backs, in unison, they pulled out axes. Jeb and I went to reach for a shotgun, but it was too late. Like a pack of hyenas, they were on top of him, chopping him down with their sharp axes, all the while hooting, hollering, and laughing maniacally. Blood and guts from Jeb sprayed into the air. His screams loud. I raised my rifle from the porch and took aim at one of these evil clowns. I squeezed the trigger, hoping my aim was true. The bullet impacted into the back of one of the clown's heads. It merely turned to look at me with red glowing eyes.
Good shot, Farmer Angus, but you're next,
it cackled at me. I ran into my house and locked the door and went for the phone. I dialed the sheriff as quickly as my shivering fingers could. Sheriff Rikers, speaking. What seems to be the problem? Clowns, Sheriff! Killer clowns! They got Jeb, and they're gonna get me next! I screamed incoherently into the phone. What, Angus? Clowns? And they did what? Come on now. No need to be trying to prank me, replied Sheriff Rikers. This is no joke, Sheriff. They came out the woods and butchered old Jeb right in front of my very eyes. Hacked him to pieces. Killer clowns, you say? Well, holy shit. I thought we only heard about this kind of thing in the bigger cities, mused the sheriff. All right, Angus. I'm gonna send out Deputy Doyle to come check on you. Hang tight. I was about to tell the sheriff to bring the fucking SWAT team when the line went dead and all the lights in the house cut out. Shit. I looked out the front window towards Jeb's truck, but the clowns were gone. All that remained was a puddle of blood by his open truck door. They'd taken his body and must have disappeared back into the woods. Now darkness had fallen across my farmstead, and the dread was palatable. I lit a candle and sat by the locked door. Who in the hell were these men running around dressed up like circus clowns? And what did they want with me? Thank the Lord, the wife and Toby were safe at her sister's house. I waited for hours as night crept in, when finally I heard the deputy's cruiser arrive. He pulled up right beside Jeb's truck. Deputy Doyle got out, hand on his service revolver, surveying the carnage. I unlocked the door and hollered at him. Deputy Doyle, quick into the house, run! There's killer clowns in the woods! Doyle smirked at me and replied lazily. Yeah, Sheriff. Inform me the circus done paid you a visit, Angus, but I don't see nobody. I tell you what, I'm gonna have a look around the property and woods, make sure everything is A-OK, alright, partner? I shook nervously, shrugged my shoulders, and locked the door. What a fool Deputy Doyle was not to heed my warning. He sauntered off towards the barn, and that was the last I saw of him as the night shrouded him like a cloak. Hours passed, and my candle burned low. Then I smelt it, the smell of burning wood. I peered out the kitchen window only to see that my barn was ablaze in flames. I could hear the pigs and cows hollering as they burned alive, and then from the depths of the barn they began to stream out, clown after clown, all wearing bright clothing and having two wide, hideous grins and glowing red eyes. There must have been 20 or 30 of them, and they were heading towards my home. I pissed myself, grabbed my rifle, and headed into the living room. Then I heard a thud against the front door. With tears in my eyes, looked out the front window to see Deputy Doyle's severed head lying on my front porch. Oh God, they got him too. Lord help me, why was this happening? The clowns surrounded the house, laughing maniacally the whole time. At every door and window they stood, 3 deep, all grinning at me with their fake smiles and razor-sharp teeth. The inside of my house glowed red from their evil eyes shining in the night. I fell to the floor. I couldn't take the terror no more. I raised the rifle and put it in my mouth. Better to go out this way than butchered alive, I thought. I gagged on the barrel. The clowns began banging on the doors and windows, thumping in harmony. Then one of them spoke. His voice crackled with malice.
You're next, Angus! No escaping!
The sound of axe smashing at the front door rang out. I began to squeeze the trigger when I heard the worst noise yet. A truck pulled into the driveway. I lowered the rifle from my face and peered out the front window. And beyond the clowns was my wife and her son exiting the truck. All at once, the evil demonic clowns turned to their hateful gazes upon them. and raised their axes. My wife and Toby screamed in vain into the darkened night, but it was no use. I raised the rifle to my mouth for the final time. The circus truly had come to town.
We hope you enjoyed these deliciously scary tales. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Ta-ta for now.